News team, assemble! News team, assemble!
Welcome to your weekly news report. My name's Greg. So today, Warren G. Harding has unexpectedly died at the age of 57 at the Palace Hotel in San Francisco. It was caused by a combination of both heart failure and a stroke. Harding was born in Blooming Grove, Ohio on November 2nd in 1865. He was the oldest of 8 children to his parents, Dr. George Tyrone Harding Sr., a devout Baptist, and Dr. Phoebe Elizabeth Dickerson Harding, a Methodist accused of medical malpractice. Harding had 5 sisters, 2 brothers, and had a brother and sister who both died of typhoid fever at the age of 12. When he was 10, Harding moved to Caledonia, Ohio. There, his father had acquired the local newspaper called the Argus, which started his interest in journalism. Harding would participate in bands where he would play the cornet, but always stuck to his love of journalism. During his time at studying at Ohio Central College, he graduated at the age of 17 and started working at the Union Register, and would eventually go on to start his own newspaper, the Marion Daily Star, a Republican-supporting newspaper. From his involvement with his Republican-backing newspaper and the support of his wife, Florence Duchess King DeWolf, he started to grow interest in politics, and was elected state senator in 1899 until 1902, then lieutenant governor in 1903 to 1904. Lost the bid for governor of Ohio, and then resurfaced in 1912 at the Republican convention, when he nominated William Howard Taft as a candidate for the presidency. Harding was next involved in the political world by becoming a U.S. Senator in 1915, and was one until 1921. The year before, however, the Republican convention was stuck over whom they wanted to pick for the Republican candidate for president, and was then paired with his vice president, Calvin Coolidge. In the presidential election of 1920, the two candidates were very similar. Both Harding and his opponent, James M. Cox, were both born in Ohio and part of the state government. Both were newspaper publishers as well. Harding crushed Cox in the election, however, having highest percentage margin in the United States presidential elections with a 26.2% point victory over Cox. Harding had 404 electoral votes, 16,144,093 popular votes, backed by 37 states, and had 60.3% of the election. Cox wasn't even anywhere near those numbers, with just over 127 electoral votes, over 9 million popular votes, and support from 11 states, and a very low 34.2% of the election. President Harding was enacted into office on March 4th, 1921, 122 days after he was elected as the 29th president, and the 10th president to be a Republican. Harding's presidential career had a very significant impact on the country, and will continue to, despite being in office just over 2 years. Harding signed several bills early on, all proposed to him by the Republicans he knew very well in Congress. Harding had removed the wartime controls, enacted the Veterans Bureau, which served to take care of the wounded veterans from World War I. Harding then pushed the idea of public works projects to give some sort of job for all those unemployed. He created a federal budget system, which still requires a yearly statement from the president of the projected annual budget, and also established a set group dedicated purely for the federal budget. He approved bills that were to regulate the practices performed on farms, protect the land, and to protect products from farms. He lowered taxes with the Revenue Act of 1921, going from a corporate tax rate of 62% to a huge drop of 50%. Along the presidency, he also had a tight set of rules and regulations for immigration, raised the tariff rates, and more rules were added to watch the budgets. Most of the bills were proposed by Republicans in Congress, which turned out to be them using Harding to pass what Congress had wanted. Harding was set to establish resolutions and treaties with countries involved with World War I. It first started with the official release of all involvement in the war, with the Knox-Porter Resolution. He then went on to talk peace treaties with Germany, Austria, and Hungary. Harding also set up the Washington Naval Conference, which was a meeting with the United States, Great Britain, France, Italy, China, Japan, Belgium, the Netherlands, and Portugal. He proposed a deal to drop several warships if others did the same, as well as a set of rules to follow for naval warfare and strategies. Harding was elected into office during the Prohibition era and the Roaring Twenties. Despite the lack of alcohol, the country was in a feel-good state. Women were also allowed to vote thanks to the 19th Amendment, and the country was economically stable. Harding, though, suffered from depression after learning of the betrayal from the members of Congress, and spoke only to Herbert Hoover the few months before his death. Harding also had a reputation of having relationships with different women during his presidency and marriage. One relationship that allegedly made him the father of Elizabeth Ann Blasing, his illegitimate daughter. Harding was a great president, and now his vice president, Calvin Coolidge, will take over as president of the United States. Now here's Dan with the next story.
Thank you, Greg. Here's the next segment for today. Calvin Coolidge was the 30th president of the United States, a true American. He was born on the 4th of July in Windsor County, Vermont, in the year 1872. He was the son of John Coolidge Sr., a man of many trades, ranging from farming to being a public servant of Victoria Moore, who died when Coolidge was just 12 years old. Coolidge Sr. sparked his son's interest in politics, as well as being a part of the Vermont House of Representatives and the Vermont State Senate. One could say Coolidge was destined for a career in politics. With his father being a politician and other members of his family having occupations related to positions in the government, he attended Amherst College, then moved to Northampton, Massachusetts, where he became a lawyer, eventually earning enough to open his own firm. He became a country lawyer and gained publicity, which led him to his future wife, Grace Goodhue, a teacher for deaf children. They had two sons, John and Calvin. John was born in 1906 and died in 2000, and Calvin was born in 1908, but died from blood poisoning in 1924. Coolidge first launched his political career by backing William McKinley's campaign in 1896 and was asked to be a part of the Northampton Republic City Committee and eventually the City Council in 1906. He was elected to be House of Representatives, staying only for the term so he could tend to his family. He revamped his political career by becoming the governor of Massachusetts in 1918, where he then dealt with a political strike in Boston. The strike was a refusal of joining the Union, which was a showcase of his enforcement in difficult situations. Coolidge was picked to be the vice president for President Harding. When Harding died in 1923, Coolidge assumed the role of president. In his first official talk to Congress, he wanted tax cuts, a reduced and limited help to farmers, a bolstered economy, and a correction in foreign policy. He was adamant in the reduction of aid to farmers, denying several bills that were derived to help them. He was offered an idea for a power alternative that would place generators hooked to rigs along the Tennessee River. Because all of these direct answers to plans mostly no, he was seen as extremely negative. Despite being seen as harsh, he was approachable and liked for his simple answers. When Coolidge ran for re-election in 1924, he was paired with Charles Dawes and won the majority votes. He came into office in the midst of the Roaring Twenties and was moving on with the times. He was focused on civil rights for all people and wanted every citizen to feel safe. He tried for laws that would have made lynching illegal, but was shot down by most of the southern states. In foreign affairs, he wasn't keen on wanting to be a part of anything or any other problems in the countries. He rejected the membership of joining the League of Nations, but did take part in major needed foreign acts. He signed the Kellogg-Briand Pact of 1928 that was signed by countries of World War I that looked to end the fights over issues relating to the war. He was also the only president to ever go to Cuba for a conference and defended Mexico in their pursuit to stop rebels. The Soviet Union looked at Coolidge as rude since Coolidge never engaged with him. Coolidge was definitely a controversial president. An example would be the Coolidge effect. The idea that a man can't stay with just one woman, going back to a group of chickens that Coolidge interacted with. Coolidge was also severely depressed after his son's death, saying that it made the job of being president awful and he wanted to stop because of it. Coolidge unfortunately died on January 5th, 1933 from coronary thrombosis. Now here's Reggie.
Thanks, Dan. Here's our final story for the day. Reporting live from Waldorf Towers in New York, where Herbert Hoover, former President of the United States, has died at the age of 90. His death came at 11:35 a.m. in his suite. The cause of death seems to be massive internal bleeding. Herbert was the last remaining one alive of his siblings. His brother Theodore died nearly 10 years ago. Hoover had two sons, the first being Herbert Charles Hoover, and the second being Allen Henry Hoover. After the Hoover family had their two boys, they went to China. Herbert Hoover was born on August 10, 1874 in West Branch, Iowa. He was the first president born west of the Mississippi River. When young Hoover was 6 years old, his father died. 3 years after his father passed, his mother also died. Herbert was then raised in Oregon by his aunt and uncle. Hoover was a professional mining engineer and was raised as a Quaker. He attended college at George Fox University and the University of Stanford. During his adult life, he was a humanitarian. Hoover was in China during the Boxer Rebellion in 1900, and he organized relief efforts for trapped foreigners. He did so for years, then moving to help Americans stranded in Europe when World War I began. 3 years later, he was the head of the Commission for Relief in Belgium. That helped produce food for 9 million Belgians after the encroachment of German troops. Hoover's humanitarian success earned him a position as Secretary of Commerce under President Warren Harding. He then continued to hold his position under President Coolidge. He ran for election in 1928. He was the Republican Party's nominee. He won 40 states and defeated Democratic candidate Alfred E. Smith, who was then the governor of New York, by a record margin of 444 to 87 electoral votes. The one thing we will not forget from President Hoover's presidency is the Great Depression. In October of 1929, the stock market crashed, which then signaled the beginning of the Great Depression. President Hoover put his best foot forward to get the U.S. out of the Depression. His efforts were noted but not appreciated. President Hoover was not elected to a second term. Thanks for watching.
(1924). Coolidge first launched his political party by back William McKinley's campaign